speak, as these leaders come, and this has never happened before in our country, that a spiritual leader is slaughtered inside the church. This happened on the 3rd of May 2026 to Reverend Julius Ndumia Ngari, PCA, Tubanga Parish, I believe in Nakuru. I want to suggest we stand for a minute silence to remember this affront, this aggression against the Church of Jesus Christ. Why don't you do that for just 1 minute? Thank you so much. He will be buried tomorrow in Nyeri. And some of my colleagues, the Honorable Rigathi Gachagua called me in the morning. I think he's gone to church in Rongai, outside Rongai in Kajiado. And tomorrow will be a very emotive day. As the African leaders gather in Nairobi, the country will be burying a spiritual leader, as if it was not enough to throw tear gas inside a church, as happened in the church in Othaya, another PSC church, PCA church, I think it was. And we could see a man of God dressed officially in what Shakespeare would have said, speaking costumes, right? Living and escaping for their dear life. That is the state of our nation. That is the state of our freedom of worship, which, by the way, is guaranteed under Constitution 2010. Very specifically, you're dealing with an administration which gives lip service to that concept of freedom of worship. And yet, the Church of Christ was used in 2022, truth be said, because Apostle Kenyeli challenged us very powerfully that if we keep quiet, then I think that amounts to complicity. But I now see that the church is rising up again. And there's going to be light over Kenya. Light over Kenya. That we are not going to have fake utterances on the freedom of worship. Fake. These days on social media, and the young men have told me, Nigod Manze. So, fake. And the whole church gets hoodwinked into believing that men and women who come in the name of Jesus Christ, holding the Bible, can actually turn around and become what we all know is the truth in our country. Isn't it the case that a proposed legislation that is supposed to regulate the church was just sat on, waiting for the appropriate time to spring and say, Apostle Chris, you will be regulated. Why is it? Or you'll be overtaxed. Why is it that this congregation looks so prosperous? You have to give somebody to Zakayo, something to Zakayo. The preacher for the day looked at what we are seeing. Because God is not poor. And you serve a living God. And He has given you favor to reach out. If you hear the true story about our brother, Stephen Kenyeli, Musyoka, that you can rise from being a chokora to an international preacher, then you see We really truly serve a living God. So I'm here as we launch this very important program. What Apostle Ikui thinks may look like child's play to a lot of people. But the deep spiritual significance of this event is going to touch every corner of our republic. I know for a fact that altar, which some leader raised and says you will not allow people like Kalonzo to come to Garissa, for example, that altar is already defeated in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. How I wish, Apostle Ikui, that you are going to have that caravan move not to Kitui, move beyond Kitui to Garissa, to Ajia, to Mandera, the corner river, I think Dawa, which is a boundary between Kenya, Ethiopia, and I think Somalia. That very important synchronized point, the border of Kenya, our boundary with Tanzania. By the way, we, during the administration of President Kibaki, when I was privileged to be his vice president, we took the decision to deposit officially at the United Nations headquarters in New York, the Kenyan map. That had not happened. Because if you look at the Bible, you see old cities and old countries like Libya recognized. Cyprus, an island country that I had the privilege to spend almost a year in. Cyprus, and the significance of the king of Assyria and those areas. But a lot of people seem to think Kenya is described as the land beyond the rivers of Abyssinia. I think there was a time when the whole of the African continent was described as Ethiopia, almost. Until, of course, the Queen of Sheba went across to visit David. Or say Solomon, sorry, Solomon. And I now think it is time for Kenyans to sincerely believe the next leadership. Well, how I pray myself, if God favors me with that responsibility, and pray for me, I would want to be a man like David, a man after God's own heart. And that makes all the difference. You cannot be a man under God's heart and then you ride on the blood of Kenyan children. Like that of Abel, was it Abel, Cain? The 100+ young Kenyans whose blood is crying out between 2023 and 2024. And many others as we speak who get abducted. And yet we know that under Constitution 2010 we got rid of, for example, detention without trial. That will never happen. Now, in order to circumvent that constitutional requirement that there shall be no detention in Kenya without trial, then you invent something called abduction by Subarus. You are put inside the boots of cars na kuzungushwa. That is a form of detention. Even that is unconstitutional. Therefore, you have seen some of us go before the courts of justice to plead that corruption must come to an end. Well, today, very significantly, we have put over candles, said corruption must end. So, we are more than 12 disciples of Jesus Christ. Here we have men and women of God. The evangelical church, which by the way is very strong in the United States of America. You can see the American flag. We all know what the Bible teaches about the state of Israel. We know that the Roman Catholic Church in Kenya has stood very strong. And that is a challenge to the